Hi, it's Phil here from Revive My Ride, and today in this video I'm going to show you how to paint rusty metal and get long-lasting results. I'm going to demo on the rusty chassis on my car, but to be honest, the process I'm about to follow will work on any rusty objects that you're looking to protect. So behind me, the white chassis rails are areas that I've already treated, but let's have a look and see what it looked like before I started work on it. As you can see here, there's quite a lot of rusty metal before I started work on it. And using my rust treatment method, this is how good I managed to get it looking. Okay, so when I'm tackling rusty metal, I actually follow a 4-step process, and that's worked really well for me in the past. And I'll just quickly outline those 4 steps for you and then we'll get straight on with it. Step 1 is mechanical removal of the rust, and I've got quite a few different methods to show you, so you can choose what works best for you. Step 2 is to clean up the metal, so degrease, remove dirt, underbody waxes and all that sort of stuff. Because if you don't do that, then any products or paint you apply just won't adhere properly. Step 3 is using products that either rust convert or remove rust, and that's to make sure that metal's as clean as possible before moving on to the final step. And the 4th and final step is to apply rust preventive paints and top coat paints to give long lasting protection to the metal. Okay, with that said, let's get straight to it. Okay, so that method I've been showing you so far, just using hand tools, is quite a gentle method, and so a lot of the original paint will be left intact. And if you've just got a few small rust areas or bits of paint to touch up, then that's ideal. You don't want to take all the original paint off. But if you know that you're going to be doing a lot of rust removal as part of the process, you might want to move to a powered method. So here I've got like a knotted wire wheel on an angle grinder, and so that will remove the underbody wax and get the rust off, you know, the majority of the rust all in one go. And where you've got the access, you may want to skip to this powered method because of course it's going to be a lot faster. And finally, if you want a powered method that's a little bit gentler, then I use one of these. This wire wheel, it's not as abrasive and it doesn't spin quite as fast, and so that's much more likely to leave a lot of the original paint on. It's a little bit slower than the angle grinder, but it's certainly faster than using a wire brush. Okay, so let's see this in action, and then that'll be it for mechanical cleaning, and we can move on to the next step. So I've just got like a normal green scrubber there, and I found that these work really well, and just a container for the thinners. And I'm just going to decant some of this into the container. So I'm going to get my mask on because I can already smell the vapours, and I don't want that getting on my lungs and irritating my throat. Thinners or white spirit will remove the bulk of underbody wax, greases and all that sort of stuff. And the technique is to scrub at it with the green scouring pad and then have a clean shop cloth nearby and then wipe that over the surface afterwards. But we still need the rusty metal to be cleaner than that, so we need to use some more products. I'm going to introduce the products one at a time as I use them. So the first step along the way is using Marine Clean, and this is a cleaner and degreaser, and in fact they don't call it Marine Clean anymore, they literally just call it Cleaner Degreaser. And you should always dilute this a minimum of 1:1. I use it 1:2 to be honest, and it makes the product go a little bit further, and I find it still very effective. The key thing is this is just meant to be cleaning all those areas and getting any dirt and grease and oils and that sort of thing out of the area. And that's really crucial because the next step after this is a rust treater. And so if there's anything there that acts as a barrier to prevent the rust treater getting in, then it'll stop it from either removing the rust or converting it. Okay, so I've got my stuff prepped behind me here. So here's the Marine Clean Industrial Cleaner Degreaser. And this is just a bucket of water because what the instructions say is you wipe all the area. So obviously I've got this little sponge here. Go over it all, scrub it, get it nice and clean. But then you should rinse away with water, and I find the easiest way to do that is a really big sponge and a bucket of water. So you just kind of run over with a sponge, rinse the sponge and then do it again. And so for this step I'm going to wear my glasses just in case some of that degreaser kind of flicks or splashes. And then of course I've got gloves. So let me show you what I've got here and then we'll get into doing the job. Okay, so here's the marine clean. And then this is just my rinsing water. And these are the areas that I'm going to work along. And you can see some of them are bare metal, and that's because I've been wire brushing and sanding away any rust that's on there. So I'm just going to get started inside the rear wheel arch here. And there's a part of the frame that comes up quite near the wheel. And of course you can imagine that this is an area that can rust quite badly because stones and other things will chip the paint and make it rust. And the other thing you'll see is even though this is all nice and clean now, so I got all the rust off, it's a bit of a pitted surface now. So it's still nice and strong, so that's fine. But even though I've been over it with the wire brush and sandpaper and all that, then there is the chance that there's some little pits of rust in there which we'll want to kill off. So that's why we're cleaning first. And then we're going to come back with step 2, which is like a rust remover step. Okay, so here's my marine clean. And I'm just going to give that a really good wipe everywhere. And now I'm going to go in with my sponge of rinse water. And I'm just going to clean that off, because you have to get that degreaser off again. So effectively it's just bare metal and there's no products left on these surfaces. And I just do that a couple of times really. Always seems a bit weird introducing water into a bare metal environment, but you know, that's what the instructions say. And water seems to be the best way of getting the marine clean off because it's water based. So it's designed to be kind of washed away again with water. It's actually one of the strengths of the product, that it's easy to remove it from the surfaces and leave them clean and ready to go, you know, with your rust converter or with your paint. So with the wheel arch part done around here, I'm going to work along this bar now, which is the one that runs underneath the sides of a car on a TVR. They call these the outrigger areas. Don't get too worried about if you don't have a car that looks like this one, because this is just about cleaning, treating and painting metal really. And I will be doing the underneath and back edges and all the rest, but that's not as easy to show you on camera. And now of course coming back and doing the rinsing. And here's some of the areas underneath and behind that I was talking about, just so you know I'm being honest. Okay, so I think you get the idea. So that's enough for the Pour 15 Cleaner Degreaser. One thing I will say though before I set it aside, having just set it aside, be really careful on exterior paint. So this stuff will actually bleach your paint if you're not careful. So if you're doing any areas where exterior paint is there, I would mask it off and make sure you don't get any on there. And if you do get some on your paint, then you have to wipe it away very quickly. There's quite a lot of stuff on forums about this stuff, especially when it's used you know, in quite a strong concentration, fading paintwork, so be careful of that. Okay, so the next step on our rust treatment journey is prepping ready. So this stuff is, again, it's water based, and it's actually a rust remover, and it's a pre-primer. So it leaves a zinc phosphate coating on the metal, which is perfect ready for painting. I'll be honest, it is a little bit of a pain to use, because if there's any rusted surfaces, and again we're assuming there's some rust pitting, or maybe there is some light surface rust and you've got the loose stuff off, you can put this on, but you have to make sure it stays wet for 10 to 20 minutes, which means, especially on a warm day, going back and reapplying. And then once it's finished, say your 20 minutes is up, then you come back with a wet sponge again, exactly like the last step, because again it's water based, so you're meant to clean away any excess. I come back with the wet sponge and I wipe it down a couple of times. So let's get started with this prep and ready then. So this stuff you do use neat. but a little bit goes a long way. So I'm just going to give it a bit of a shake up, and then I'm going to decant some into that aerosol lid. So you should always put it in a plastic container, and you shouldn't return any back to the bottle at the end. So what I do in order to make sure I don't waste any is I just put a little bit, and then if I have to come and top this up again, then of course I do, because you're literally just wiping over the surfaces, a bit like how we did with the marine clean earlier. Okay, so I've just got a different clean sponge to use this time, and I'm just going to put a small amount on the sponge, and then literally just going to go in and apply this to the metal. So I'm starting back at the front again, inside the wheel arch on this chassis here. And I'm going to wipe it on everywhere and make sure I get plenty on there. So I'm getting the sponge pretty wet so that then when I go onto the surface, some of it's running down a little bit. And it's a good idea to take note of the time, because you know you want a dwell time of 20 minutes, but you'll need to check it in between then just to make sure it's staying wet. Remember, it has to be wet for 20 minutes. So after about 10 minutes, I put some more in my container and then I go around it all again. I'll show you this first bit and then we'll move on from there. Yep, so just going over it all again. Again, plenty on the sponge so that it leaves quite a lot of the product on the surface. Okay, so that's our 20 minutes of keeping that wet up now. So I've just got my warm water and sponge. And I'm just going to give it all a good wipe down. Bearing in mind you're not scrubbing at it, you're literally just wiping off the excess really. So let's have a quick look at it, because we should be able to see that there's a very faint, thin film of zinc phosphate on this bare metal, and we should be ready for painting now. Okay, so hopefully you can tell on these camera shots, but you can see that it's gone very grey now, and that's the zinc phosphate that you're seeing. So of course this is in the wheel arch area, but then I did treat all the way along this outer chassis, and anywhere that I've treated, I've also keyed the paint as well, you know, just with some sandpaper to scuff it up, ready for painting. Okay, so we're ready for painting now, which of course is the Rust Preventative Paint. Now it wouldn't be POR 15 if there weren't some strange rules to follow in the directions. So the first one is, this stuff really reacts to moisture, and that's why it's so good, because it's almost impervious to moisture, and the way that it reacts if moisture is present is it actually just becomes even harder, while still retaining an ability to not chip too easily. So that's what makes it great. But because it is so sensitive to moisture, if you just used a bit from quite a large can and then put the lid back on, then even if you try to seal that lid as well as possible, then the rest of the can will just go rock hard within just a couple of weeks. That's why you buy in little cans, because what I'll hope to do is use up this can and just dispose of the rest. If I'm keeping it a couple of days and I'm going to reapply, then that's fine, but what you'll find is it does go off quite quickly. So a lot of people will buy in packs of 6 of these small cans if they're doing a larger job, and then they'll do the job in sections and they'll dedicate 1 can to it. The second thing that's a little bit peculiar about the POR 15 Rust Preventative Paint is, if you decide to apply a second coat, and to be honest you should do to make sure you get full coverage, you have to start applying the second coat while the first one's still tacky. If you don't do that, then the second coat won't adhere properly to the surface. But let's say you apply just 1 coat and you run out of time and you leave it overnight. Well, the following morning you have to come along with sandpaper and you have to scuff the surface to key it, otherwise this second coat won't adhere properly. And the third thing about POR 15 paint, I'm really not selling it here, but this is really good paint, so that's why people put up with the peculiarities. So the third one is, it's very sensitive to UV, so direct sunlight. So if you're going to use this anywhere where direct sunlight will get to it, then that will degrade the paint. So you're recommended to apply a top coat to protect the paint from the sunlight. I know it seems a bit mad, but it's true. Yeah, so you just need to mix the paint really well. So that's what I'm doing now, so you get it to be a nice, even, consistent colour. And it's worth covering anywhere that you don't want this paint to get onto, because like I said, it goes really hard and it can be really difficult to remove. And that includes from your skin, so it's a good idea to wear gloves, because if you get it on your skin, then again it can be really difficult to get off. And chances are it won't come out of your brush either at the end, although of course if you get to it straight away with some thinners you might clean your brush. So I just use cheap disposable brushes. Okay, let's start getting it applied, and you can see how it goes on. So it goes on pretty much like any other paint that you would apply to metal. You know it's possible to get a nice even and thick coat with it, really, and you can get it brushed on quite quickly. Now of course you can just use a bigger brush if you have a bigger area to do as well, and that would help. And if it is an area where you had some pitting of the metal, then of course it's worth making sure that you get down into any of those pits, and so you get a good covering of the paint. One thing I will say about this paint is it adheres really well to bare metal. Well, obviously I've got that Por 15 on there, but some paints, they don't go on that well on shiny, smooth bare metal. But this stuff's kind of sticky, and so it goes on really well, and quite evenly as well, especially just for this first coat. So I've finished with my Por 15 Rust Preventive Paint. You can see I've done it in a silver colour, and there it is on the chassis rails there. Now the reason I did it with the silver colour is because the final colour is going to be white. But what I plan to do is inspect this car once a year, just quickly on the ramps to make sure it's holding up okay. And so I chose a white coat for the top coat and a silver coat for the Rust Preventive Paint, so I can see if any of the white coat's chipped away through to this layer, and then just top it up. Well, that's the theory anyway. We're literally on to the final step now, so you can actually just leave that paint like that, but as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it's quite sensitive to UV. And although it's chip resistant, it's not quite as chip resistant as this stuff is. So this is the final Por 15 step. And this one's Whitecote by Por 15. Brilliant white coating. And it's actually a 2-pack paint. So you can see I have these 2 containers. This is effectively the paint, and this is a hardener. Now you don't have to use the full tin of this, and actually I painted what I call the outrigger areas on this TVR just literally with one of these pots. So theoretically I only need 1 pot of white coat now to do a similar job. So you can actually just mix this 3-to-1, and as this is a 4-ounce can. So what I'm proposing to do is to mix 3 ounce, which is about 90 ml of this, with 30 ml or 1 ounce of this. And I'm just going to mix it up in a little container. And that way I can seal this stuff up and use it another time, because it goes quite a long way really. And I'll probably find some other areas of work I want to do on the car. So I mentioned earlier the Por 15 Rust Preventive Paint. If you're going to second coat it or top coat it, you have to do it while it's still tacky. If not, you have to wait until the following day until it's fully dried, and then sand it to key the surface. So this is still quite tacky, and what you're meant to do is mix up the white coat an hour before you need it. So I'm going to mix that now, and this paint should still be sticky to the touch, and I'll be able to go ahead and do my white coat painting then. And as I said, that's the final stage for me. So I'm just going to give this white coat a good stir up. And then this is just a measuring cup that you can get from any painting supplies place. And if you remember me saying I'm going to mix this up 3-to-1. So it's 3 ounce or 90 ml into the cup. There we go. And then this is the hardener activator that goes with the Por 15 white coat. And we need 1 ounce or 30 ml of this. So we're already on 90, so that's going to take us to 120. And then we're just going to give this a good stir. And then the instructions just said an hour now before I can use this. Okay, so this paint will have had time to partially cure now, so it's ready to go. And the way Por 15 describe when the rust treatment paint's ready to paint, because it's dried off enough but not too dry, is they say a light finger drag. You can just feel the stickiness just on the surface there, but none's coming off on your fingers because it's not really fully wet still. So that's ready to go. So now this stuff's a bit different to the rust treatment paint we used. The recommendation is to wear a mask that's proof against organic vapours. So I'm going to be wearing this mask, and I'm going to be wearing just some normal thin gloves. And you've probably noticed there's a little bit more noise, and that's because I've got the garage door open because I want a bit more ventilation. So let's get to it. Okay, so that's all of the painting done. Let's have a quick dive under and see what the end result is. So starting at the front of the car, you can see I've done that lower wishbone there. And if we move around the side, then of course I've done the upper wishbone as well. And then this is the start of the chassis, so that's the outrigger starting there. And you can see all the way along the doors, including any brackets that hold it to the body and cross members, and then even some of this central area here you can see in the middle. I've rust treated and painted that, and then finally we move to the rear, and then there's a of course a hub there, but then upper and lower wishbones on the rear as well. Okay, so that's the 4-step process finally done, and that's how I go about painting rusty metal. If you've got any questions or comments about anything you saw in the video, then please post it below in the comments and I'll try to help if I can. And if you found the video useful and you want to see more, then please consider subscribing and clicking the bell, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.